The last wick is trimmed. The workroom is cooling. The smell of tallow hangs in the air, rich and animal and faintly sweet, the smell that clings to everything in this trade. The candles are set in their rows. Done for the day. In a market town in the English Midlands, a woman named Margaret Reeve is finishing her work. She is a chandler. A maker of candles. One of the most essential tradespeople in any town that refuses to surrender to the dark. Every morning she is here before the light comes up. Rendering fat. Stringing wicks. Pouring and dipping and waiting. Tending the heat. And every evening, when the work is done, there is a ritual. The trimming of the last wick. The cooling of the tallow pot. The slow, deliberate closing of the day. Tonight, like every night, Margaret will trim the last wick before rest. Let us join her as the workroom quiets. The workroom is a low-ceilinged space behind the house, connected by a covered passage. It must be separate. Tallow rendering requires fire, and fire requires careful placement. The town has seen what careless flame can do. Margaret has lived here long enough to remember the cooper's yard that burned when she was a girl. 3 houses gone before morning. So the workroom stands apart, connected but distinct. Stone floor. Plaster walls. Shelves along 2 sides holding finished candles in their papers. A ceiling hung with drying racks where newly dipped candles hang in rows like pale fruit. The central feature is the hearth. Wide and deep. Designed for the iron tripod and the cauldron that hangs from it. Right now the cauldron is cooling, its tallow beginning to solidify at the edges, still liquid in the center. Tomorrow it will need to be softened again. The cycle continues. Margaret stands at her workbench. She is a woman of 51. Quick hands. Steady eyes. Her hair is mostly gray now, kept back with a linen cap. Her face is lined by years at a fire, from the warmth of the tallow kettle and the squinting that heat requires. She does not look like someone who has worked since before dawn. But she has. She picks up the small scissors. The scissors are iron, with looped handles. She keeps them sharp. A chandler's scissors are like a baker's knife or a tailor's shears. The quality of the edge is not a luxury but a necessity. A dull blade drags at the wick. A sharp one takes it cleanly. She made a point of honing them this morning, before the work began. She does this more out of habit than necessity. The edge is almost always fine. But the act of testing it, of drawing the blade across a rough cloth and seeing how it bites, settles her into the day. She has been a chandler for nearly 30 years. Since her husband Jonas died of the sweating sickness and left her the trade and 2 children under 10. She had not chosen the craft. She had inherited it. But the choosing, she has long since decided, is less important than the committing. Many people choose well and commit poorly. She had not chosen and had committed entirely. The result was the same, she became a chandler. A good one. She holds the scissors now, examining the last candle of the day's production. A tallow candle, rush wicked. 6 inches long. One of a set of 12 from the final pour of the afternoon. She looks at the wick. The wick has set well in the cooling tallow. It stands upright, clean, centered in the candle's body. A good wick must be centered. A wick that drifts to one side will burn unevenly, sending wax pooling down the low side and leaving a column standing on the high side. The candle will gutter. Smoke. Fail before its time. Centering is a skill. Her daughter, who helps in the workroom, can center a wick almost as well as Margaret now. Almost. The wick on this last candle is centered. Margaret brings the scissors to it. The excess protrudes above the tallow by perhaps half an inch, too long. A wick that is too long smokes. The flame is too large, too hungry, burning through the tallow too fast and throwing off soot that blackens the room and stings the eyes. A wick should be trimmed to a 1/4 inch above the surface. No more. No less. She makes the cut. The small snippet of rush falls onto the workbench. She examines the candle once more. The wick is clean and short, ready to be lit when the time comes. She sets it in its place in the row. 12 candles, finished. The day's work is done. She allows herself a moment to look at the shelves. 2 weeks of production stand here, waiting for market day. It is a good quantity. She works through the count in her head, as she always does at the end of a day. Tallow dips, 48. The common candles that most of the town burns. Rendered beef or mutton fat, wick of twisted rush, quick to make and quick to buy. Every household needs them. Mold candles, 12. These take longer. The wooden molds must be filled carefully, the wicks threaded through before pouring. But the result is a candle that burns more evenly. She charges more for these. The Priory is her best customer for mold candles. They require a dependable flame for the hours of prayer. Beeswax tapers, 8. These are her best work and her most expensive product. The beeswax comes from the apiary 2 miles outside town. It is not cheap. But beeswax burns with almost no smoke, and the smell is sweet rather than animal. Households with money prefer them for the parlor. Churches prefer them for the altar. 48, 12, 8. A reasonable day.
Thomas is Anne's husband, not a formal apprentice, but in practice he has become one. He came to the household 5 years ago knowing nothing about candle making. He was a tanner's son who had learned to work with his hands but not with this particular craft. He has learned quickly. The rendering he mastered first. The rendering is physical work, hauling fat, tending fires, skimming the rendered tallow clean. His tanner's strength served him there. The dipping took longer. You cannot rush dipping. Each candle must be lowered into the tallow and removed at exactly the right speed. Too fast and the layer is too thin, bubbled. Too slow and the previous layer remelts rather than building up. The pace must be steady, patient, exactly right. Thomas, who is patient by nature, took to the dipping once he stopped trying to do it quickly. The trimming and inspection, these he is still learning. He has a tendency to leave the wicks too long. Margaret has told him why 3 times. He understands the reasoning. But the instinct to leave a little extra, a small margin of safety, keeps reasserting itself. He will learn. He is 3 years from mastering the trade. Perhaps 4. And then Anne and Thomas together will be able to manage without her. Margaret finds this thought more comforting than sad. Through the small window, the sky is deepening. She can still see the rooftops of the houses across the lane, their chimneys sending pale threads up into the darkening blue. Somewhere a fire has been stoked, she can smell it, a different smell than her own workroom, wood smoke and something cooking. She stands at the window for a moment. The world outside the workroom is beginning its evening. Doors closing. Voices dropping. The sounds of a town settling. In the mornings, when she comes out to the workroom in the dark, there is a particular quality to the silence, a waiting quality, as if the day is holding its breath before beginning. The silence of evening is different. Fuller. Satisfied. The day has already given what it had to give. She prefers the morning silence if she is being truthful. The morning silence is full of possibility. The evening silence is full of the past. But both have their value. She turns from the window. There is one more thing to do before she leaves the workroom. She opens the ledger. It lives on a shelf near the door, a small book bound in brown leather with a brass clasp. She has kept it since the early years of the trade, when her husband's accounts were a chaos of papers that she spent months sorting into order after his death. She will never have a chaos of papers. The ledger is her protection against that. She uncaps the ink, takes the pen. She writes in a neat, economical hand. Thursday. Dipped, 48 tallow. Mold, 12. Wax, 8. Stock, full. Tallow pot, cooling. Wicks, checked, for set aside for repriming. Molds, tight. Beeswax, good. Note, butcher's extra fat available, send word Friday. She reads it back to herself. Accurate. She caps the ink. Closes the ledger. Replaces it on the shelf. Her husband had kept his accounts in his head and on scraps of paper and in a running memory that his mind held perfectly until the morning it didn't hold anything anymore. She had loved him, but she had spent 3 months untangling his affairs after he died. She had sworn, that autumn, that she would never leave such a tangle for anyone. She never has. She will take. She selects a candle from the shelf. Not one of the beeswax tapers, those are for sale. Not a mold candle either. She takes one of the ordinary tallow dips, plain and practical, a candle from the middle of the row. She will carry it to the house to light their supper table. This is another ritual she keeps. She makes the candles. It is only right that she is the one to choose and carry the one that lights the household. The daily choosing is also a small quality inspection. If a candle is not good enough to carry to her own table, she does not put it on the market. This one is fine. Smooth. Even. Properly trimmed. She wraps the base in a twist of paper. The warmth of her hand would soften the tallow otherwise, and tallow that has been gripped and softened and rehardened is slightly misshapen, slightly fingerprinted. She holds it carefully. She does a final pass. This is not a formal inspection. She doesn't tell herself she is inspecting. It is just a walk. Around the perimeter of the room, her eyes moving over the shelves, the hearth, the cauldron, the molds, the wick bundle, the ledger. Everything present. Everything where it should be. The fire is nearly out, the spread coals have dimmed to a pale orange, barely alive. By the time she wakes tomorrow, they will be cold gray ash. She does not bank this fire. Unlike a baker's oven, a tallow fire offers no advantage in staying alive overnight. Better to let it cool fully. Safer. She pulls the door from the passage behind her, feeling its seat in its frame. It doesn't lock. The workroom has nothing worth stealing except the candles themselves, and the smell of tallow announces their presence so plainly that a thief would have to be determined indeed. She steps into the covered passage. The air shifts, cooler, damper, smelling of the garden rather than the tallow room. She breathes it in. The passage is 8 feet long. Her husband built it when they were first married, before the children came. She had stood in the doorway and watched him hammer the posts in and argued that the expense wasn't worth it. Rain was only rain. He had said, "Try working the winter in wet clothes and tell me again." She had not argued further. For 30 years now she has crossed this passage through every weather. Rain drumming on the roof above her. Snow piling against the sides. Frost. Summer heat. The passage holds none of these things inside itself. It is simply covered, or roof in two sides, open at each end. But it is enough. She has thought of Jonas in this passage more than anywhere else. Perhaps because it is the in-between space, not the workroom, not the house. The liminal place. She does not think of him with sadness anymore. She thinks of him the way you think of someone who taught you something important. With acknowledgement. With a kind of settled gratitude. He taught her the trade. He didn't mean to, he meant to keep it himself for decades yet. But he taught her, and she kept it. She steps through the inner door. The house is warm and lit with its own tallow candles, 3 of them in the main room, 1 on the mantel shelf and 2 on the table. And is at the hearth, stirring something in a pot. The smell is immediate and good. Onion and barley and something herbed. Thomas is awake now, sitting at the table with a serious expression, apparently recovered from his earlier sleep. He is mending a length of Wick cord with small, careful stitches. "You're mending?" Margaret says, setting her candle on the shelf near the door. "And said too." He holds up the cord. The spool end was fraying. Margaret examines it. He has used too heavy a thread. The cord will be stiff where he's mended it. She says nothing. The cord is mended. The stiffness will soften after a day or 2. He is learning. "Where is Nell?" she asks. "Upstairs," and says, without turning from the pot. She ate already. She was hungry. Nell is Margaret's granddaughter. 7 years old. And Thomas's child. She came to live with them 2 years ago when Anne's lying in coincided with Thomas being laid up with a broken wrist. Margaret had taken her in for the month and found that the month had extended, as months with children sometimes do, into something more permanent. She does not object to this. Nell has her mother's quickness. Her father's patience. A combination that produces, in a 7-year-old, a child who notices everything and waits until she has understood it before asking about it. She has already begun helping in the workroom on the simpler tasks. Fetching the rush bundle. Counting finished candles. Watching the dipping with the intensity that children bring to watching things done skillfully. Margaret hears her footsteps on the floor above. The light tread of a child who has been told not to run indoors and mostly obeys. Then silence. She is probably reading, or looking at pictures, in the lamplight from the window. She has a small book of woodcut illustrations, saints and animals and one terrifying image of a dragon, that she returns to compulsively. Margaret climbs the stairs to look in on her before supper. The upper room is simply furnished. 2 beds. A chest. A small table with a candle burning in its holder, one of yesterday's production, she notes, which Thomas must have taken up. Nell is on her bed with the book open on her knees. She looks up when Margaret appears in the doorway. "Grandmother. You ate already." "I was hungry." Anne said. A pause in which Nell weighs whether this response has been adequate. "I saved you the last piece of bread," Nell says. "Did you?" "Yes." A careful pause. "It's on the table. I put a cloth over it so nothing would get to it." Margaret comes into the room and sits on the edge of the bed. She looks at the book. The dragon, open on the current page. 7 legs. A tail like a rope. Your mother has supper ready, Margaret says. I know. Come down in a little while. Nell turns the page. A saint with a lamb. Were there good candles today? She asks. Good enough. Thomas said he trimmed 22 wicks by himself. He did. Were they right? Mostly. Nell nods seriously. This is apparently the answer she expected. The passage is 8 feet long. Her husband built it when they were first married, before the children came. She had stood in the doorway and watched him hammer the posts in and argued that the expense wasn't worth it. Rain was only rain. He had said, try working the winter in wet clothes and tell me again. She had not argued further. For 30 years now she has crossed this passage through every weather. Rain drumming on the roof above her. Snow piling against the sides. Frost. Summer heat. The passage holds none of these things inside itself. It is simply covered, or roof in 2 sides, open at each end. But it is enough. She has thought of Jonas in this passage more than anywhere else. Perhaps because it is the in-between space, not the workroom, not the house. The liminal place. She does not think of him with sadness anymore. She thinks of him the way you think of someone who taught you something important. With acknowledgement. With a kind of settled gratitude. He taught her the trade. He didn't mean to, he meant to keep it himself for decades yet. But he taught her, and she kept it. She steps through the inner door. The house is warm and lit with its own tallow candles, 3 of them in the main room, 1 on the mantel shelf and 2 on the table. And is at the hearth, stirring something in a pot. The smell is immediate and good. Onion and barley and something herbed. Thomas is awake now, sitting at the table with a serious expression, apparently recovered from his earlier sleep. He is mending a length of wick cord with small, careful stitches. You're mending? Margaret says, setting her candle on the shelf near the door. And said too. He holds up the cord. The spool end was fraying. Margaret examines it. He has used too heavy a thread. The cord will be stiff where he's mended it. She says nothing. The cord is mended. The stiffness will soften after a day or 2. He is learning. Where is Nell? She asks. Upstairs, and says, without turning from the pot. She ate already. She was hungry. Nell is Margaret's granddaughter. 7 years old. And Thomas's child. She came to live with them 2 years ago when Anne's lying in coincided with Thomas being laid up with a broken wrist. Margaret had taken her in for the month and found that the month had extended, as months with children sometimes do, into something more permanent. She does not object to this. Nell has her mother's quickness. Her father's patience. A combination that produces, in a 7-year-old, a child who notices everything and waits until she has understood it before asking about it. She has already begun helping in the workroom on the simpler tasks. Fetching the rush bundle. Counting finished candles. Watching the dipping with the intensity that children bring to watching things done skillfully. Margaret hears her footsteps on the floor above. The light tread of a child who has been told not to run indoors and mostly obeys. Then silence. She is probably reading, or looking at pictures, in the lamplight from the window. She has a small book of woodcut illustrations, saints and animals, and one terrifying image of a dragon, that she returns to compulsively. Margaret climbs the stairs to look in on her before supper. The upper room is simply furnished. 2 beds. A chest. A small table with a candle burning in its holder, one of yesterday's production, she notes, which Thomas must have taken up. Nell is on her bed with the book open on her knees. She looks up when Margaret appears in the doorway. "Grandmother. You ate already." "I was hungry." And said. A pause in which Nell weighs whether this response has been adequate. "I saved you the last piece of bread," Nell says. "Did you?" "Yes." A careful pause. "It's on the table. I put a cloth over it so nothing would get to it." Margaret comes into the room and sits on the edge of the bed. She looks at the book. The dragon, open on the current page. 7 legs. A tail like a rope. "Your mother has supper ready," Margaret says. "I know. Come down in a little while." Nell turns the page. A saint with a lamb. "Were there good candles today?" she asks. "Good enough. Thomas said he trimmed 22 wicks by himself." "He did. Were they right?" "Mostly." Nell nods seriously. This is apparently the answer she expected. The 4 of them eat at the table. Anne's pottage is thick and well-seasoned. Barley, onion, a piece of salt mutton that has been in the pot since morning. Herbs from the garden, rosemary, thyme, a little sage. They eat with wooden spoons from earthenware bowls. Bread to sop the last of the pottage. The conversation is the conversation of a household at the end of a day. Thomas describes a problem he had noticed with one of the dipping rods, a slight warp that was causing the candles to hang unevenly. And asks about the market schedule and whether Margaret wants her to handle the priory order this month. Margaret says she will think about it. She means yes, but she has not yet said yes, because something in her still needs to consider whether the saying of yes is the right thing. And knows this pattern. She does not press. Nell eats in focused silence. She has a habit of eating without speaking, applying to her food the same serious attention she applies to most things. When she is finished, she looks up and asks if she can have the bread she saved for her grandmother. Margaret has already eaten her bread. She does not mention this. "No," she says simply. Nell accepts this without argument. After supper, she and Anne wash the bowls while Thomas takes Nell upstairs. "The priory," Anne says, resuming the earlier conversation. "I'll let you manage it." Anne is quiet for a moment. She is arranging her face, Margaret suspects, controlling the small expression of satisfaction that she knows her mother will notice. "Thank you," she says. "The price is fixed. 3 shillings for the 12 mold candles. Don't let Brother Keeper try to revise it down. He always tries." "I know. He'll say the last batch burned unevenly." "Did they?" "No." "Then I'll tell him so." Margaret hands her the last bowl to rinse. Tell him directly. Don't soften it. He respects directness. And looks at her. A small look. Something in it is amused. Mother, she says. I know Brother Keeper. I've been delivering the priory order for 2 years. A pause. Yes, Margaret says. You do. She hangs the cloth and says no more about it. They come to sit by the fire in the main room. Thomas has come back down from settling Nell. He sits in the corner chair and takes up a small piece of carving. He has been making a toy for Nell, a jointed wooden horse that he has been working on for 3 weeks. Slow progress, but the thing is beginning to look like what it is meant to be. Margaret settles in her chair. The fire here is a proper domestic fire. Wood and a little peat. Warm and various in its colors, orange and red and, in the hottest part, a blue-white that you rarely see if you're not looking for it. She looks for it. Her father had been a blacksmith. He was the one who taught her to read fires. He could tell the temperature of a forge fire by its color and sound, by whether the iron hissed or sang or was silent when he brought it near. She never learned the blacksmith's fire. She learned the chandler's. But the attention to flame was the same. A good fire. Nothing alarming in it. She settles back. Her hands lie in her lap, finally still. They are always moving in the workroom. Even when she thinks she is resting them, she is not. They pick up tools, sort wicks, test surfaces. The enforced stillness of the evening is something she has had to learn. She thinks about the candles. 48 ordinary dips. 12 mold candles. 8 beeswax tapers. Not each a remarkable thing on its own. A tallow dip is not an object anyone admires. You do not hold up a tallow candle and remark on its beauty. It is useful. It is used. It is replaced. But she thinks sometimes about where they go. The tallow dips will burn in kitchens and bedrooms and workrooms across the town. They will light the fingers of the seamstress, the pages of the reader, the face of the sleepless child. The mold candles will go to the priory, where they will burn through the offices, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, non, vespers, compline. She knows the names because she counted them out once, curious about what the monks were doing with so many candles at so many hours. The beeswax tapers will go to the alderman's household, she suspects, or the physician's. Someone who can afford the sweetness. They will burn in a parlor, or before a household altar, where their clean smell is part of the occasion. All of this light she has made. It does not strike her as anything more than ordinary. But tonight, sitting by the fire, she lets herself feel it a little. She can hear the town through the closed shutters. Not much, at this hour. The market is long since done. The lane is quiet. Occasionally a cart in the distance, someone coming in late from the farms. The sound of a horse's hooves, muffled by packed earth. The bark of a dog somewhere, twice, and then not again. She grew up 3 streets from here. Married and moved to this house at 21. She has lived within a quarter-mile radius for her entire life. She has occasionally wondered what lies beyond it. But the wondering is academic rather than restless. She does not wish she had gone. She is constitutionally settled, planted, she sometimes thinks, like an old apple tree that has grown too long in one spot to imagine moving without damage. The trade is here. The customers are here. And Thomas and Nell are here. She is here. The town sounds continue their occasional punctuation of the silence. She listens without particular attention. "How does the horse come along?" she asks. Thomas holds it up. She looks at it. 3 legs carved to completion, the 4th still blocky. The head is good. He has got something horse-like in the angle of the neck, in the suggestion of the muzzle. "The leg is the difficult part," he says. "Too thin and it snaps." "Leave it a little thicker," Margaret says. Nell won't mind. She'll ask why one leg is thicker than the others. Tell her that horse has a strong left front leg. And laughs from her chair. Thomas considers this seriously. Will she believe that? "No," Margaret says. "But she'll understand that you tried." He looks at the horse a moment longer, then returns to his carving. The small sound of the knife on wood joins the fire. Margaret watches the fire. Thomas carves. And has taken up a stocking she is knitting, the needles clicking a soft steady rhythm. The room has its own sound. Its particular combination of fire and needle and knife and the faint settling of the house timbers at the end of a cool day. She knows this sound. She thinks about Jonas. She does this less often than she once did. Not because the memories have faded, they have not, or not much, but because she has thought them through so many times that they have worn smooth. Like stones in a river. The sharp edges are gone. What remains is mostly warmth. He was not a perfect man. He was impatient with details, hence the chaos of papers. He was quick to opinion and slow to revise it. He could be tight with money in ways that frustrated her when they were young. But he was good-humored. He could make her laugh at problems that were not funny. And he loved the trade with a sincerity that she had absorbed, over 20 years of marriage, into herself. She had not expected to love the craft of chandlering. She loves it now. That is his doing, or partly his. The way a thing offered with genuine enthusiasm transfers some of that enthusiasm to the recipient even after the giver is gone. She follows the fire. The coal at the center glows a deep red. She watches it. Footsteps on the stair. Nell appears in the doorway. She is in her nightgown, her hair loose, her feet bare on the floor. "I can't sleep," she says. It is not quite true. She has not yet tried to sleep. This is the nightly bid for extension, 1 more hour in the warm room. Margaret opens her arm. Nell crosses to her and settles into her side. She is warm and slightly bony, the way 7-year-olds are, all elbow and knee when they settle against you. Cold feet, Margaret notes. The floor is cold. Then keep them off the floor. Nell tucks her feet under herself. They sit in silence for a few minutes. Thomas carving. And knitting. The fire. "Grandmother," Nell says. "Can a candle burn all night?" "Depends on the candle. A small rush light, 3 hours perhaps. A good tallow dip, 5 or 6. Can it burn while you're sleeping?" "It can. But it shouldn't." "Why?" Fire while you sleep is dangerous. The flame can tip. The tallow can run. A careless candle has burned many houses. Nell considers this. So you have to put it out. Yes. But then it's dark. Yes. Another long pause. I don't like the dark, Nell says. I know. Margaret says, when I was your age, I didn't like it either. Nell looks up at her. Do you like it now? She thinks about this honestly. I have made my peace with it. What does that mean? She looks at the fire. It means the dark is not something I fight anymore. It comes every night. Fighting it wastes the night. Better to rest in it. Nell thinks this over with the seriousness she brings to most things. But you still put out the candle. Yes. So you don't fight the dark, but you also don't help it come. A pause. That's right, Margaret says. She had not thought of it in exactly that way before. But that is right, she thinks. You don't fight the dark. You don't invite it early. You let the candle burn while it's needed. You put it out when the time has come. And then you rest in what remains. Nell seems to accept this answer. She settles more firmly against her grandmother's side. The clock on the mantel shelf marks the quarter hour. It is a simple clock. Brass and iron. Her son William, in Bristol now, a shipwright, sent it to her 3 years ago. She had been skeptical of clocks. She had managed without one for 50 years. She has since decided clocks are excellent. Not because she could not tell time without one. The church bell marks the hours, the sun and her own body's patterns mark the rest. But because a clock on the mantel is its own kind of reassurance. Time is passing. The day is ending. The night is measured. The quarter-hour chime is soft. A small clear note that does not startle. She counts the distance from the last hour. Nearly 9 o'clock. Nell should be in bed. And Thomas looks half asleep over his carving. He wakes at 4 to start the fire, and 4 comes early enough. She does not rush anyone. But she feels the hour. And sets down her knitting. She stretches her hands, the knitter's gesture, fingers spread, working out the hours of tension. I'll write to the butcher tonight, she says. About the extra fat. Tomorrow is soon enough. I want to catch him before anyone else does. Margaret considers this. It is practical thinking. It is what she herself would do. Use the good paper, she says. Not the ends. And looks at her, a look that is fond and slightly exasperated. She is perfectly capable of choosing her own stationery. Yes, she says. Margaret smiles. She cannot always stop herself. And takes the small writing box from the shelf. Opens it. The smell of ink drifts across the room. She sits at the table with the candle, writing the note in the small careful hand she learned from the schoolmaster 3 streets over when she was Nell's age. Margaret watches her daughter writing by candlelight. The light falls across her face. The quill moves. There is something in it. She cannot say exactly what. Something that has to do with time. With things continuing. with the fact that her daughter's hand moves in this careful way and carries this household forward. Thomas puts the horse away. He stretches and says goodnight without ceremony. He is not a man for long farewells. He nods to Margaret, squeezes Anne's shoulder as he passes, disappears up the stairs. He will be asleep before the clock strikes the next quarter. She respects his economy with sleep. Some people treat sleep as a concession, something to be minimized. Thomas treats it as work, another task that requires proper completion. The workroom will need to be at full heat by 7. He will have the fire up and the cauldron warming by 5:30, before either she or Anne comes out. He is a good man. Her daughter has chosen well. She told Anne so once, directly, 3 years into the marriage, long enough to be sure she meant it, sure enough that it still came as a gift rather than a verdict. And had been moved. The memory sits warmly now. And caps the ink. Folds the letter. Seals it with a small press of wax. She looks over at her mother and the sleeping child. "I'll carry her up," she says quietly. "Let me sit a moment longer." And nods. She tidies the writing box. Puts away the seal. Sets the letter by the door where Thomas will see it in the morning and take it on his way past the butcher. Then she settles back into her chair with her knitting. The room is very quiet now. The clock ticks. The fire speaks occasionally, a small pop, the settling of a log. Mother and daughter sit in the particular comfortable quiet of two people who have kept company all their lives and have run out of things to say, in the sense that they have said most things already, and what remains between them is the ease of long acquaintance. This is not nothing. Margaret thinks it may be the most valuable thing there is. She shifts. Gently. Nell stirs but does not wake. She is 7 and small enough still to carry, though not for much longer. Margaret lifts her with the careful movements of someone who knows how to carry a sleeping child, the weight of the head supported, the rest following. Holding the warmth of her. The stairs are narrow. She takes them slowly, one hand on the wall. Nell does not wake. She carries her into the upper room. Lays her down on the bed. Pulls the blanket up. Nell's hand opens and closes once in sleep, as if testing for something, and then is still. Margaret stands over her a moment. In the candlelight from the hall, the child's face is perfectly relaxed. Sleeping children look, she has always thought, like the best version of themselves, all the activity stilled, the intelligence and energy banked, just the clean fact of them. She presses her lips to Nell's forehead. Then goes back downstairs. And has made tea. A small pot of it, set by the fire to keep warm. She hands her mother a cup. She's down? Deeply. They drink tea by the fire. The tea is hot and slightly bitter. She has been drinking tea for 15 years, ever since the trade made it affordable, and she still cannot decide if she truly likes it or simply likes the habit of it. The warmth. The ritual of it. She thinks probably the habit. But the habit is pleasant enough to be its own virtue. How does the new rendering technique look? Anne asks. She has been trying a different approach to the skimming, a finer cloth, to catch more impurities. I've been watching it, Margaret says. The last batch was cleaner than usual. I thought so. Keep trying it. 3 more batches before we know for certain. and nods. This is how they work. Observation. Small experiment. Careful conclusion. 3 data points before a decision. Her daughter has learned this from her. She is not sure she herself learned it from anywhere particular. It simply seems right. They sit quietly for a moment. Then Anne says, "I've been thinking about the shop." Margaret waits. There's a room on the market lane. The Glover is leaving it at Christmas. The one beside the cloth merchant? Yes. A shop. A permanent stall on the market lane rather than the twice-weekly stall they set up in the square. It would change things considerably. More customers. More consistent trade. More expense. It's a large room, Margaret says. We can fill it. And the rent? And names a figure. Margaret considers it. It is not impossible. With the priory contract, with the alderman's household, with winter coming and every household in the town needing more light. Come spring, she says. The room might be gone. Then another room. There will be another room. And looks at her. You're not opposed, she says. I'm not opposed. I'm careful. A pause. You're always careful. And you're still here to run a trade. And smiles at this. She sets down her cup. Come spring, she says. The room's candles are burning low. She rises to check them. The 3 on the table have burned to stubs. The one on the mantel has perhaps another hour in it. She pinches out the 2 table stubs. The smoke threads up and away. She examines the 3rd, it will last the walk to bed, nothing more. She replaces it in its holder. There is something she has observed in herself. As a chandler, she is incapable of wasting candle ends. Other households toss them out. The trimmings, the stubs too small to relight. She saves all of them in a clay pot by the workroom door, and when the pot is full she renders them down and adds the tallow back to the supply. Nothing is thrown away. Jonas used to say this was excessive. She had told him that the difference between profit and loss was often a clay pot full of stubs. He had been unable to argue with this. She looks at the remaining candle. It has perhaps 40 minutes in it. Enough. And rises. She takes the candle from the table, the last one she had carried up earlier. She does not need Margaret to tell her to check on Nell. She will check. She always checks. Good night, Mother. Good night. And goes upstairs with her candle. The room is quieter. Margaret remains in her chair by the fire. She does this most nights, the last 10 minutes alone, after the house has gone up, before she herself follows. It is not that she needs the solitude. She has been more or less alone in her thoughts all day. There is a particular solitude to working at a craft, even when others are present. The hands are busy but the mind is elsewhere, or nowhere in particular. This is a different kind of alone. This is the house quiet around her. The fire low. The clock ticking. The room simply there. She has come to think of these 10 minutes as the final accounting of the day. Not in numbers, she does that in the ledger. Something more general. The day passing through her at its own speed. The fire is almost out. She does not add more wood. It will keep itself going at this level for another hour, then die down to embers, then cool. By morning the hearth will be cold gray ash, ready to be swept and reset. She listens. Outside, the town is fully settled. Nothing from the lane. Nothing from the houses nearby. The occasional creak of wood, the house adjusting itself, the timbers expanding and contracting as the temperature drops. She thinks about tomorrow. The butcher and the extra fat. The note Thomas will carry. The 3 batches of rendering that will come of it, if the fat is good. And managing the priory order. Nell, who is growing fast, she will be able to help properly in the workroom within a year, doing the simpler pour and the wick threading. Margaret will teach her. She thinks there is enough ahead to do. This has always been her comfort. Not that things are fine. Not that everything is settled. Only that there is enough to do. Enough to fill the days forward. Enough to be part of. She looks at the candle on the mantel. The flame is burning well. Steady. The wick properly trimmed. She trimmed it herself this evening, before carrying it in. A 1/4 inch above the tallow. She watches it. The flame does not flicker. There is no draft from the shuttered window, no movement in the room to disturb it. It simply burns. This is what a well-made candle does. It does not perform. It does not announce itself. It gives light, steadily, for as long as its material lasts, and then it is done. She has spent 30 years in this trade and she still finds this satisfying in a way she cannot fully account for. Not the grand scale of it, the tonnage of tallow rendered, the thousands of candles produced, the total hours of light given to the town across all those years. Just this. A single flame. Burning well. She did that. She rises from the chair. Her knees are stiff. Her lower back makes itself known as it always does when she has been sitting too long. These are the complaints of a body that has worked hard and is beginning to register its years. She does not find this troubling. She takes the candle from the mantel. The flame bends slightly as she lifts it, then steadies. She makes her way around the room in the familiar pattern, banking the fire properly now, the fire poker spreading the remaining coals in the way that best preserves them overnight. She checks the shutters. Both seated. She touches the door of the passage, closed, as she left it. One final look at the room. It is the room she has lived in for 30 years. The chairs by the fire. The table. The shelves of small objects, a painted jug, a wooden cross, a sprig of dried lavender in a clay cup, the clock ticking steadily. Nothing grand. Nothing that needs to be. She takes her candle and goes to the stair. The upper room is quiet. And is in bed, her candle out. Her breathing is already slow and deep. In the other bed, Nell sleeps in the center, one arm thrown out. Margaret changes from her day clothes without lighting a second candle. She knows this room by touch after 30 years. The chest at the foot. The peg on the wall. The place the floor creaks near the window. She folds her cap and sets it on the chest. She looks at the window. A pale gray quality to the darkness beyond, the sky not truly dark this time of year, just deeply dim. Stars, if she were to open the shutter and look. She does not open the shutter. She knows the stars are there. She sets the candle on the small shelf by the bed. Its light makes the room small and warm and close. The ceiling low, the walls near. The breathing of the sleepers around her. This is the last thing the candle will illuminate tonight. She takes the small scissors from her pocket. She keeps them with her always. A habit so ingrained she would feel undressed without them. She examines the candle flame. The wick, burning at its quarter-inch, steady and clean. She does not trim it. This candle will be out soon. She sets the scissors on the shelf beside it. This is the final ritual of every day, the last candle of the night on its shelf. The scissors beside it. The room quiet around it. She has done this so many times that the sight of it, the small flame, the small scissors, the shelf, is itself a signal. Her body understands what follows. Her eyes grow heavy at the sight of it, the way eyes will respond to the signals they have learned to obey. Sleep is near. She knows it. She lies down. The mattress is straw and fleece. The blanket thick wool. The pillow filled with the same. These are not luxuries, but they are made well. She made them well, or supervised their making, because something in her cannot allow poorly made objects to persist in her household. A badly stuffed pillow becomes an annoyance over years. A well-stuffed one simply disappears into comfort. She pulls the blanket up. The candle burns on the shelf. From here it is a warm point of light in her peripheral vision. She does not look directly at it. Looking at a flame in the dark changes your eyes, makes the room seem darker when you look away. She knows this from the workroom. You do not stare at the fire when you need to see. She does not stare at the candle. Outside, the town is fully still. No cartwheels. No voices. Even the dogs are quiet. The quiet of a town well into its sleep. She lies still. The day passes through her without urgency. The 48 tallow dips. The trim of the last wick. The scissors clicking shut on the small stub of rush. The smell of the workroom as the fire cooled. Anne's note to the butcher. Thomas's wooden horse, one leg still unfinished. Nell asking about the dark. She had said, "I have made my peace with it." It is true. She thinks about peace. Not as absence of difficulty but as something more active. An ongoing negotiation with the things that cannot be changed. The loss of Jonas. The passing of years. The body's slow accounting. All these things she has made peace with, one by one, over time. The peace is not permanent. It must be renewed. But it holds, mostly. It holds well enough. She breathes. The candle on the shelf burns quietly. Why? She is nearly asleep. The room is not quite dark, the candle still burning, but her eyes have closed. She can feel the mattress taking her weight. The blanket's warmth. Somewhere at the edge of her awareness, Nell shifts in her sleep. A small sound. Nothing. The clock downstairs ticks on. She cannot hear it from here, or almost cannot. It is below the threshold of her attention. The fire in the main room is embers now, she knows. By morning, cold. She will have the workroom fire going by 7. Thomas will have the cauldron warm. The tallow from yesterday will soften in the heat. The rendering will begin. Another day of candles. 48 dips. 12 mold. 8 wax. Or more, if the butcher's fat is as good as in hopes. Her thoughts thin. The wick. The trim. The small scissors clicking shut. The last wick of the day, perfectly trimmed, standing ready in the cooling tallow. Ready for whenever the light is needed. The candle has burned nearly to the shelf. The flame is small now. Not guttering, just small. Honest about what remains. It gives enough light to see the room's shapes. The chest. The window's gray outline. The sleeping forms in the other bed. Enough. She opens her eyes once more. Reaches to the shelf. Takes the scissors. The final trim of the final wick of the night. The scissors close. The flame, given less to feed on, grows smaller still, then halts. She sets the scissors down. She folds her hands. The candle burns. She breathes. In. Out. The room is warm. The blanket is heavy. The candle will go out on its own, in its own time. She does not need to extinguish it. It will spend the last of itself quietly, and the dark will come as it always comes, not as an ending but as a rest. She has made her peace with it. The flame holds. For a moment longer. Then less. Then smaller. Sleep. Just sleep. The dark is kind tonight. And all is well.